Welcome to the FedEx Institute of Technology podcast, where innovation meets insight. As the University of Memphis' hub for research and emerging technologies, we bring together experts, leaders, and change makers to share ideas shaping the future of technology, business, and society. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
Pulling AI and cyber together. That's really kind of the topic that we're at. And so what I want to do is let each panelist introduce themselves for a little bit. You guys have heard me talk, so I won't go first, but Pavan, I'll let you go first.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pavankumar. I'm a faculty here at University of Memphis with the Management Information Systems Department and the Business School. I work in the intersection of emerging technologies and cybersecurity. So I have a couple of interesting research projects going on. One that keeps all the CISOs up at night. So I'm more interested in how are they managing organizational agility while they work with risk management and reduction of risk. And I'm also involved with slightly technical work like adversarial AI attacks and what kind of defense in-depth model of controls we can institute and things like that. So excited to be here today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Good. I'm Enterprise Security Director at Ookla. We're sometimes better known by our products rather than our brand name. So you may have heard of speedtest.net and the Speedtest app, as well as Down Detector. So primarily kind of crowdsourcing, dealing in the broadband space. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
My name is Dipankar Dasgupta. I'm with the University of Memphis almost 30 years. My PhD was in artificial intelligence. You can think of, I'm a hardcore AI person. So, but I wrote a paper in 1995, how intelligent agents can be used for intrusion detection. That moved me in the cybersecurity area. I'm running this center on cybersecurity here. It is a national designated center. With that, I'd like to hand over to the next person.
All right, thank you, which would be Michael Silva. Michael, you're on.
Hey guys, good afternoon. My name is Michael Silva. Thanks, Jeff, for putting me on. And I'm coming to you guys from New York City today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have around cybersecurity and networking. I have a specialization. I have a master's in cybersecurity, a bachelor's in IT. This is going back like 15, 20 years ago before it was the cool thing to do. I have 11 years of teaching experience, and professionally, I founded Archon One, which is a vCISO advisory firm for law firms in New York City. And I also have an artificial intelligence company, Emely AI, that we created software based on problems that we experienced and solved for our clients operating in the vCISO space. So thanks, Jeff, for having me
on. My pleasure, my pleasure. So first question for the group. I've seen statistics that say as much as 78% of prototypes fail. Maybe your experience is slightly different. We could all decide what failing is and turn that into learning. So we'll keep that in 100% of prototypes you learn, and maybe in 78% you learn even more. But what's your perspective on what might be affecting the perceived success of a prototype in AI?
Well, that's a great question, actually. There are many perspectives to it. To be very honest with you, I don't think 78% of them fail technically. The bigger problem is most organizations often don't really have a use case. So they pursue a market that doesn't exist. And especially, again, I'm not taking a dig at anybody, but most consulting firms just do it because there is practice. So they try and come up with use cases that may or may not exist and give it a try. So I think the failure of prototype largely is because companies are still trying to sort of figure out a product market fit. So that's one. Second, from a technical standpoint, a lot of it has got to do with the right kind of data that you can get to train your models. So what ChatGPT has done, according to me, is that it has created a veneer of being smart, while a lot of internal flaws remain deeply embedded because organization-specific data might be hard to access. So those are my 2 points.
So Michael, we won't make you go last every time, so I'll let you answer your question.
Sure thing. Well, I'm going to give these guys some fodder to work with because I have several on my list. I think the easiest thing to answer with this is just it's hard, and a lot of organizations aren't prepared for it, right? So this is a very typical garbage in, garbage out. Typical RAG models use vectorization, as most of us know, to generate answers. And in some cases, you should not be using a generative answer at all, right? It should just be a fact that you're looking for. But pushing AI on top of a problem that you haven't clearly defined, where you don't have leadership buy-in, where you don't have sufficient technical skill internally to follow up or to develop, where data privacy and security aren't a part, with overhyped expectations, culture, and again, just that lack of purpose combined with poor data quality. I mean, it's a recipe for failure, unless you've got somebody in the room who can look at the problem top down with experience and say, this is what you should be doing. Here's a small case to start, and here's what success looks like. That's just my initial feedback. There's a lot more to cover there.
All right, thank you. Dr. Dasgupta?
So I think the prototype question I'll come a little later. Just I would like to introduce things. AI has revolutionized, and it is going to touch every aspect of our life, our work. Now the question is, the way the big techs are pushing an universal problem solver. That's not going to happen. You cannot have a universal problem solver and then you put some bags on that as an interface to solve very specific problem. So in business term, it's called hallucination. In technical term, it's an error, it's a mistake. So when it comes to prototype, the question is the prototype is built from scratch, taking an AI model? And as I said, there are 20 plus different AI algorithms. Most of the industry is pushing for one model, and that also have some consequence. There are other strategies maybe added to that to make it more efficient. But what I perceive that AI will democratize the industry. There will be smaller models coming for specific application with probably 99% accuracy. And so question to the prototype is it a standalone prototype for healthcare or MRI that will be much efficient? Or is it a prototype built on top of existing models, which is like a plug and play? So failure have to be decided on what kind of prototype it is.
Great. Travis, what's your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm going to echo some of the others. I think overambition and lack of planning, right? I think, like was mentioned, there's a lot of hype surrounding AI. And so executives want it in the building. They want people to be using it and working on it. They're trying to, fit a round peg in a square hole sometimes where it's not necessarily a great fit. And I think, there's also a lot of expectation that this is going to be happening quickly because all the other companies are doing this quickly as well, right? You hear about your colleagues. Well, we've used AI for this and it's revolutionizing our work and our work orders are down 50% or whatever. And so I think, luckily, we have a little bit of experience in the hardware world as well with one of our products called Ekahau, and it's kind of the same thing. So we've learned some hard lessons when it comes to overambition, not planning out correct functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and looking at the variety of variables that can go wrong during that entire build process.
Right. If you'll notice, one of the things I'm observing is the reasons for failure we could have talked about 10 years ago for why ERP systems fail. And we could have talked about that, in a similar time frame about e-commerce solutions. So it seems like there's some human behavior that's common today as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and beyond. So I'm going to ask a little bit of a leading question, but kind of shift maybe one more level down technically. So one thing I'm observed, and you guys can tell me if you see it differently, is that often what happens at a board level, someone asks the CEO, Sridhar, you're a CEO, so I ask you, what's your AI strategy, right? And people often will say you shouldn't have an AI strategy. You should have a business strategy that's supported by AI. So I certainly buy into that. But often people think about only kind of the end user aspect of AI. So what's the interface look like? Do I have the chatbot built up? But they're not yet thinking about what's the reference architecture that you have to have under it. So from your perspective, what are the most critical pieces of a reference architecture that you would advocate that people put in place earlier rather than later in a journey to bring more AI into their company?
Well, I think that's I'm probably the last person that should go on this one because we're, at Ookla, we're at the beginning of our AI journey, just like a lot of companies out there. And so I think, I'm still, as is so common in the security world, catching up to kind of some of this emerging technology, and I need to learn more about reference architecture. So I'm glad you asked the question, but I'm going to defer to the others.
All right. I'll give you guys a hint on something at the end. But Michael, I saw you kind of ready to jump in, so go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I can give you at least my top three on this. So we've been through this quite a bit at the board level with other organizations, and a lot of this comes down to understanding the current data architecture and infrastructure that you have. It's a huge one, right? Because nothing happens in these AI systems unless you have good, clean data. We talked before about humans in the loop, right? So if you don't have good, clean data, you need to be able to identify that by a human and find a way to clean it up. That's like an internal process you have to create or solve for. Governance and security is also another huge, huge problem here, right? I know this is the security panel, right? You mentioned this is going to get technical, so I won't go into too much technical, but I will tell you this. If you are not building secure by design, secure by default as a part of your journey, you are going to introduce security bugs, right? There's this one thing I see all the time, especially in the vCISO work that I do, which is that security and convenience are often on the opposite ends of the same exact rope, right? So you've got those areas where you can use your fingerprint to unlock your phone, right? But a gummy bear with your fingerprint in early versions can do that, or Face ID can be manipulated by a photo, right? So there's always kind of ways around it. It's that's something I could talk about for a long time, but there's always ways around it. But the point is that if you're not thinking about it, if you're just vibe coding your way off a cliff to a prototype, right, with just what you're seeing, you can run into some serious trouble. So that's definitely the next big thing. Last item I would mention is just interoperability and scalability. So if you look at the way that other large organizations have done this, like you look at Jeff Bezos's Amazon, right? He had a standing order to make everything operate as a service between every other business. If you look at the way that Musk, regardless of how you feel about the guy, his solar panels power the homes that consume electricity that the cars drive in, and he's got a boring company to send the cars through tunnels and stuff. So there's a way to be able to architect this from the top where everything feeds off of everything else and you're not creating these little silo projects. But I would say that if you were going to start anywhere, these would be my top items.
Right. So maybe for the group, what's one tangible example of how you can build security in by design? So it's something that the audience could think about today.
All AI tools are considered as a black box. In security, there are some fundamentals. Need to know, need to have, right? So those are not being used. You will see LLMs are used for intrusion detection. LLMs are used for monitoring. Like yesterday's news that LLMs are used to do ransomware attack. So question is, AI has double-edged sword. You can do good thing, you can also do bad thing. If someone say that I have an AI solving this security problem, the other one will use a different AI or modification to solve to break that thing. And I think that should be kept in mind. And to the broader question that made, like business leaders or board leaders, they nowadays have to be more technically oriented because they are introducing technology and they have to challenge the companies who are bringing those technology. Can you do, white box testing? Can you do code analysis? Those are not yet been done on these LLM models. There is no independent third-party evaluation which can determine two things: the algorithmic ability and data coverage. So there are Stanford reports and many other reports. There are number of features they have tested. But there may be other things. And taking the responsibility of a product who will develop, they have to be responsible if something wrong comes. So I think when the businesses now have to be more technically savvy. That's my.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. I'll give you an example. So prior to me joining the FedEx Institute, I was the North American CIO for a very large multinational company. You can look me up on LinkedIn, but I just won't mention the name here. One of my jobs is I also owned workplace operations, worked alongside Christoph, as you can say, to bring generative AI into the IT support structure. It's one of the classic first use cases. And so what was really interesting is we started asking questions like, well, what if people ask questions like, what's Travis's salary and bonus structure, right? And what if they accidentally got an answer because of the classic data security through obscurity? And if you've opened up the databases, it's no longer obscure. And I spent more time in debates over which organization in the company had the right remit and budget to put security structures into this. Literally months and months of discussion. So I finally decided, you know what? We're just going to do it. So we created a prototype, put out RFP, had 3 vendors run through it, and somewhat forced the organization to look at data security posture in this example as a way to do it. And so I'm not advocating that you go rogue, but I'm also not advocating that you don't. So find things that your organization really must do, and I would encourage you to just force it into the system, because what happens is then people react to it. And oh, by the way, those standards are now embedded into the security standards of this company.
So building on what Michael and the others echoed here, one of the things I've been doing is working with a bunch of CISOs and talking to them about what kind of conversations they are having with the board. And the thing that never got mentioned was the regulatory ambiguity around AI. In the last 1 year, more than 485 odd bills have been attempted in various states. Most of them obviously didn't go through, but some of them have actually managed to create, for example, the Transparency Act in Utah. So now, once those regulations are set in place, regulatory compliance does become a big topic in most board conversations. So that's the kind of challenge. And given that United States does not really have a unified central, like what European Union has, a central sort of regulation, creates problems because every state has its own rules and games to work with. And now, as Jeff was talking here, about where do we find the data, who has it, who owns it. So it's a nightmare because data is everywhere siloed in so many different organizations. Just to make sense out of where it sits, who has the ownership, how it is managed becomes the challenge. So the part of securing the system itself might not be as difficult as sort of getting an inventory of where your data sits. And those traditional challenges still remain relevant. And in some sense, they have become more relevant now with the AI.
Thanks. So you guys bring up a really good point here. There's 2 really important things. I mean, A, you're correct about the security and governance, right? Security, the governance usually comes out of the EU, makes its way to California, goes to New York, and then it finds its way to the rest of the country, right? That's how it happens. However, fundamentally, Jeff, I think you scratched on a really important point here, which is how do you ensure the security of data and the privacy of that within an organization when you have so much? And I would just want to give you a very simple explanation I think the audience can visually identify with here, and it involves Legos. You guys might know I have 5 children under 10 years old, so I see a lot of Legos. I'm thinking in this mentality quite often, right? If you don't want someone to have access to information, you don't give it to them. So when you do this in AI, it looks something like this. If you had a bucket of Legos and they were all different colors, let's say that private information was represented by red Legos. If you gave the bucket of Legos and it was devoid of the color red, and you told somebody to build a castle, right, build your generative AI answer, then the castle that you get back, regardless of what the design looks like, will never include a red Lego. right? So I think that organizations, this goes to the secure by design, secure by default mentality. As you are building, if you're looking at it as a bolt-on retroactively saying, I'm going to use RBAC and Azure permissions and top-down folder level, like the traditional 1990s mentality on that, you're opening yourself up to these hallucination and data breaches, when the reality is you should be building it saying, information that's going in, does it belong here or not? Is this person even privileged to have this part included? Because when it's not there, your design won't ever have anything with the red Lego, and you aren't afforded the opportunity to see the information because it was never part of the answer to begin with, right? So it's just a different mindset going into it. At least that's how we do. We've had success there.
I love that analogy. I want to take an attempt to slice it one more level without getting a little ridiculous here. So in his example, that's actually authority domain specific. So if you're looking at California law, those red Legos might be slightly different than New York law, which has a different set of red Legos. And so I want to play a little bit of a mental game here. So we're sitting in the United States. Christoph, I think, is still in Germany. Michael's in New York. We'll consider New York part of the United States for purposes of this example. And so if you think about, Michael, you're supposed to laugh, buddy, on that one.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Actually, believe it or not, I'm just out of respect, I'm on mute for you.
Yeah, so in your mind, kind of go back to Dr. Bray's keynote and think about what's your mindset of China as a nation trying to get information from us in the United States. Just kind of think about what you feel about that in terms of friend, enemy, frenemy. What do you need to do? All right. So everyone's got that one. If you live in Europe, you have to think about that twice, because that's what you think about China, and that's what you think about the United States. And so you have to put in laws and regulations to kind of protect yourself from the two big powers in this example and what's going on. And then you subdivide that by states and regions and other, it gets very complicated. And so this is cliche, but I think the only way you eat the elephant, you guys know the answer, one bite at a time, right? And so thinking about what's that regulatory structure, how do you codify that? How do you understand what's going on? And then where do you start to build in those guardrails and look at the red Legos that Michael's talking about? That's something I think is also important. All right. And so if you're in a large company, work with your data privacy officers. If you're in a small company, you've got to be your own data privacy officer on how you do that. Anyone have a different opinion? Or
I think regulation is important and needed, which should include accountability, which should include auditability, which should include transparency. Otherwise, AI tools where you can select a music which may not be that risky, but making a health decision is highly risky. So regulations, I closely follow European regulatory boards, and many other countries are coming up with different regulations. So AI regulations should be there because we not only should see only the benefits, the risk is also equally powerful.
Each of you think about what's the one piece of advice you would give to the audience. So if they were to do anything this afternoon or tomorrow, what would that be to pull AI and cybersecurity together?
Well,
go for it.
I think of it as a double-edged sword. So on one end, you should think of it as a tool that can make your life easy, particularly if you're in cybersecurity leadership. I think AI will significantly reduce your people problems because you don't need entry-level analysts sitting there and looking at network all the time. Tactical decisions can get delegated eventually. But at the same time, new threats are emerging, and therefore you'll need help there. For example, how many of you know that there is something called a worm GPT, where you can generate host of new malwares for a fraction of cost? And if you go on the dark web, they even give you technical support for it now. So yeah, I mean, for $20, they will teach you how to do it. And so the entry is you just need to be good enough to have a phone conversation with a bunch of people who use Tor browsers. So that's the worry you should have. Impersonation attacks are crazy. Even the security people fall trap for it. They're that good. Business email compromises, those are they have become so common that people don't even get surprised anymore. So in my opinion, that's what you should be looking at. Look at it as both the hero and the villain, perhaps.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Sure, I'll go. Yeah, I think AI right now is a force multiplier, and I think that if you focus on the fundamentals of security and the foundational aspects of data strategy and protection, if you have a proper incident response program in place, all of this, AI is going to be a lot more easy to bring value to your organization in each of these different domains than if you were to kind of start from scratch and you don't have a data strategy, or you don't even have an incident response plan that's fully up to snuff or anything like that. You don't have exercises, or you don't have a good handle on regulations or governance. Then AI is not going to be of much help, and it's only going to complicate things. So I think if you focus on the fundamentals of your security program, build out a robust program, and make sure you have that on board, then it's going to be a lot easier to implement AI for each of these different use cases.
As I mentioned before, AI is not going to go away because benefit is visible. The important thing is, can we focus on smaller models which are domain specific? That will probably be the future, because big model universal problem solvers are not going to sustain in a long run, because 60% accuracy at best is not good for any specific application. So what I'm seeing is smaller models. Some companies have started doing it, not from the trillions of parameters to millions. It should be 10,000 to million. Parameters model should be able to do specific problem domain, application domain, and give more accurate result. Companies who will be developing that, they should be able to tell what is in there. They should be able to tell the data coverage. So those are the things I feel in 3 to 5 years are bound to come from other countries also. Because if we understand the bottom math, it is not hard. Anybody can build with a group of domain specialists, with a group of some theoretician. It is not difficult to build. So that's what I said. It will democratize the whole process, and you'll say smaller model, much more accuracy can lead to regulated and benefit to the society.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Michael, what's your one piece of advice that someone should do tonight or tomorrow?
Well, I love that question, Jeff. Thanks. I'll tell everyone what I always say, which is call me. I think that you need to have some level of no, it's meant to be a short answer, because look, everyone's kind of beating around the bush on the same point here, which is that this is a complicated topic, and if you don't have the experience to be able to go through it, if you've never seen the stuff, then a lot of your questions fall into the fourth unknown quadrant, right? You won't know to ask because you don't have somebody in there that's able to identify the problem. I think that a lot of these issues can be distilled down to simple red Lego style explanations, right? But if you don't have somebody in the room that's been through that before, or who specializes in that type of work from the ground up, where you can recognize patterns and things like that, it's a lot more challenging. It's not that you can't do it, but you just have to be willing to accept, a low prototype success rate, hallucinations, things like that. So, or you work with folks that have experience that can at least help to answer the question and point you in the right direction. So, yes, Jeff, that was an easy one. Call me is the answer. But anyway, I love talking about this stuff. So hopefully we'll be on another panel with more questions from the audience soon.
Love it. And we'll give a chance for context here in a second. So for me, I think the one piece of advice I would give you is look up what an LLM ops reference architecture is. One of my favorites is from a venture company called Insight Partners. Full disclosure, I am an advisor for them. But if you look at Insight Partners LLM Ops reference architecture, there's some really simple maps that kind of you can look at and say, oh, you know what? What am I missing? Do I have data security posture? Or how am I looking at it's not an ITIL literally, but very similar to an ITIL structure. So take a look at that. It's a nice little checkbox that you can use to see where that you would prioritize. I used to say Google things. I'm now a perplexity guy, so I like to perplex things. I'll leave myself a little bit more perplexed before that because I like the tie to source that's really there. So we really like that one. So before we turn it over to questions, one more thing. I had started by saying there are things going on in this region that are world-class or nearly world-class, and there are things that we do here at the Institute to pull things together. I want to comment on 3 things that are world-class that you guys need to be aware of. First of all, the Center for Information Assurance that Dipankar and Pawan are part of is one of the first university-based information security centers out there in the world. A lot of great research going on, and we're continuing to lead at the University of Memphis in this area. And if you think about what's going on with compute and the world's largest supercomputer here locally, it takes this kinds of expertise to drive the world forward. So, don't think that just because we're in the middle of the country, we can't lead the world, because we can. Another one would be Travis and Ookla. If you're in broadband or you're doing anything with their sets of products, we don't have to pretend they're world class. These guys are world class on how do we do that. And they've got offices here in the UMRF Research Park and are looking to partner not just with the university, but I'll see if I can speak for you guys, but also with the broader community. So lean into that. And then I would say follow Michael on LinkedIn. Michael, that's good enough. Sure. Emely and I. And some of the things that they're doing around building security into the data model, I find fascinating, and they're one of the strongest voices around on how to do that. So I encourage you to reach out and engage with all these. So thank you very much for that, and we'll now turn it to questions.
Hi, my name is Melanie Sudia. I'm Memphis Computer Support, and we support small businesses. I have a question for you guys. What is one thing that we should be looking out for as far as small businesses are concerned, so they're just not blindsided by AI-driven attacks in the next 12 months?
Great question. How do small organizations not get blindsided by AI attacks?
Yeah, I have an opinion on this. A lot of technology out there exists to help prevent cybersecurity attacks or detect or even automatically respond to them. But it's kind of an old saying in cybersecurity where, there's always the human element. You can build Fort Knox, but if the security guard drops the key outside, then, it's game over. So I think user awareness and training as far as what to look for with common phishing attempts, which are getting more advanced, what that social engineering looks like, proper password, and, just kind of the stuff that everybody's responsible for, right? Make sure that you're not sharing files to individuals outside the organization. So there's a lot of very basic things that can really help with some of these more advanced attacks where AI is or isn't involved. Two-factor authentication is a huge one. So, just kind of some security hygiene actually goes a really long way against standard attacks and AI attacks.
Jeff, I'd like to answer this one as well, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks. So,
thanks,
so first of all, it's a wonderful question, and the bad news is you're not going to get around the fact that people are going to be attacking you. It's just the way it is. It's going to be a persistent, ongoing, continuous thing. The only thing that you got to be careful about is making sure that you're not an attractive target, right? So how do you do this? Is you apply certain standards. Your security as a small business, it's not your internal discipline, right? So you only really care about security in the conditions where either a customer needs you to care about it, which is compliance, or you see somebody that get their head blown off, and then you suddenly care for a short period of time, and then you suddenly don't care after that problem is out of your memory, right? So in the meantime, it's got to be a defense in-depth exercise. One standard that I would strongly recommend you take a look at is the Center for Information Security IG1, Implementation Group 1, talk about cyber hygiene. There's several of these. As the saying goes, standards are great. Everybody should have them. But with regards to small business, take a look at CIS IG1, there's a really nice controls navigator on the page. It will step you through the basics of things like, do you have a record of all of your computers? We know where they are. Do you have two-factor? And you can go into other implementation groups 2 and 3, and the theory of should I even have a password at all? Like, there's more complex layers you can dig into. But from a compliance standpoint, that will also help you to win new business, because your clients may ask you, what security standard do you follow? And if your answer is, what's a security standard? I mean, you just immediately lose business and credibility. If you say, hey, we're IG1 moving on to IG2, we're expecting to be there by the end of this year. I mean, now you're having a different level of conversation. I do a lot of that compliance work, so I'm familiar with this particular topic. Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was just one thing I'm pretty passionate about.
Thank you. Hi, I'm PK Jain. So following up on this question about small businesses with limited budgets, right, to both implement and secure the AI, they have many options. So they can buy products from the vendors or try to build something in-house or collaborate with the research labs. So what are the thresholds, like the budget benchmarks, where you think that one or the other option may be better for smaller organizations? Thank you.
So the question is kind of from a budget perspective, what's the threshold that you should expect? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is this for security or just for implementing AI you're talking about?
Let's say security.
Okay. So security, this is a bit of a loaded question. Security, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's a longer answer. It depends on how secure you want to get. Right. It depends on what your minimum threshold is. So I would say that there's certain things that you can do that don't necessarily cost money that will help you quite a bit. So specifically, this is an AI forum, right? So I'll give you one example of how AI can be used offense and defense with this, right? If you've got systems that can replicate your voice with 11 labs and use HeyGen and then use emails and tone of voice and things like that to replicate a full experience, what saves you isn't actually the technology there. It's the control from the CFO picking up the phone, talking to the other person, texting, saying, hey, am I expecting this? Does this make sense? Having a separate non-urgent process that you're following to review something independently, right? That's not attached to the original request. So from a defense standpoint, if budget is the number one thing and you want to keep it as low as possible, it just goes back to Security Fundamentals 101, which is process and procedure. So just take a look at where your highest areas of risk are. See if you have ways to be able to mitigate those controls. Because kind of like what we said before, right? I mean, you can have the best security in the world, but if you're depending on the encryption standard, for example, to provide the security, but then you distribute your key, it's a moot point, right? So zero cost, I would say policy and procedure. You can start filling out the CIS IG1 hygiene. There are policy and procedure items there, like security awareness training is one of them. I think it's like number 13 or something. But from a tool standpoint, I would say put the tools last unless you know exactly what you're solving for a very specific problem.
An example I know of is a CFO in a very large multi-billion dollar organization got a DocuSign request to approve a budget item. The DocuSign request had people's name in the company, some generic corporate buzzword bingo that was enough to be relevant, and he hit approve, and it unlocked a virus and locked down his machine. So people get really sophisticated on how you do it. So I'm a big believer that behavior may be the first place to start. That's a lower cost item. Anything else?
Just to sort of add to that, depends on how small is your business. If you're right in the stage where you're just founding the company, you're trying something, and you're really strapped for cash, I think going with this whole idea of having our own in-house just goes out of the window, and because the ones who can do it best are way expensive and probably not a good idea for a startup. So the way I look at it is you have a great, as others said, a great hygiene training, but largely your safe bet would be to build off some of the large cloud partners. So for example, if your data is housed, let's say in Microsoft, I'm not endorsing any company, to be honest with you, but they do provide capabilities all the way from infrastructure up to AI now. So essentially you're better off, at least early on, to sort of go to one shop and get all your support there. But then you also run into the risk. I'm not giving you a solution here, but because you also run into the risk of being too deep and stuck with them. And particularly with some big vendors, they are very nice to you year one, year two. And it's only when the bills begin to creep later is when you realize, okay, you got yourself too far. So.
But your business has grown at that point, so that's good. So yes, go ahead.
So my name is Denise Devine, and I had a quick question. Let's go back to the Lego box of Legos. So when it comes to governance and data, in a corporation, who is responsible for the data as a whole? Now, being a network engineer, we got a lot of, oh, you're in charge of the data. It's like, it's not our data. We're in charge of housing the data for you and making sure it's secure, but we're not responsible for the context.
Right.
So when we start talking about AI and Lego buckets and everything else, who's responsible for the data itself? Is it the
I'll go first and give kind of a big enterprise view of that. So what happens in kind of your 10, 20, 30, $40 billion companies is that the people that manage it set up the structures, and here's how you put the data. You'll have a data privacy officer that knows kind of what's the regulation coming down. But the person that owns the data is usually a process person. It gets complex because ownership of data is data and use case specific. So the classic example would be Social Security number, right? So in some aspects, there's a much shorter need to keep that data. If you're on the HR team, then you have to keep it indefinitely. So you got to look at that intersection of data element within a data process, and then what they do in the big companies is then assign an owner. Typically, you try to get a fairly broad end-to-end process and say you're the security or data privacy officer for that process. So that's how they do it with the big guys. How do the people do it in smaller companies?
Well, I'm going to go and risk it and probably name somebody. So if you're in European Union, it's probably going to be a data privacy officer that you're now required to hire. They'll be responsible essentially. The same probably is true with California Consumer Privacy Act. Now they call it CPRA, but essentially there is a person you have to designate. But in other organizations, in other geography, perhaps the best thing to do would be to have, and this is something I've seen in other companies, is to have a very senior enterprise data architect sort of be the person. But again, as Jeff pointed out, at a tactical level, the ownership depends on use cases. But organizationally, if there is someone who sort of understands all of it, it'll probably be in the enterprise architects group.
Anyone have a counter perspective or a different perspective?
Yeah, I have a little bit of one. So we're not a giant company, and we're kind of tackling this actively right now. And something we're coming up with right now is you have to ask who's generating the data and then what the use cases for that is for. So that's kind of how we're assigning ownership to that data is who is asking what is the purpose, why are we collecting this data in the first place? Is it one of our products needed to go to, filter into for advertising or for another product? So we kind of assign the product team and the product side of the house as owners for why they're collecting the data. And then you have custodians like network engineers and architects and kind of your cloud solution architects and things like that manage the data, make sure it's safe, a security team and everything. But ultimately, the ones who are generating and collecting the data for a purpose are the owners in our eyes.
From the technical aspects, there are zero trust models coming, system hardening, and user awareness. I think that's from the technical side I can see are very important with AI-based attacks or AI-based prevention. So I think there is also a concept called shared trust among different entities in the system. So those technical models are coming. Businesses are picking it up. Like there are Palo Alto and few others are implementing zero trust data protection. So that's from the technical side.
All right. And Michael, you okay if we just have that be the last word?
Yeah, that's fine. I just 10 seconds on it. We've solved that before. We call it knowledge masters, but it has to do with having an individual person stakeholder be the owner of that. It's an in-depth model.
Join me in thanking the panel for joining this. I really appreciate it.